The transport ship Morningstar drifted slowly toward the massive space station that humans called Harmony's Edge. Inside the passenger compartment, 10-year-old Nari pressed her face against the window, watching the stars blur past. Her younger brother Hyun sat beside her, clutching a small toy spacecraft their father had given him before the trip. "Do you think Mom will like the crystals we found?" Hyun asked, his voice small in the quiet cabin. Nari smiled and ruffled his hair. "She'll love them. Stop worrying." Their father, Sunwoo, piloted the ship from the cockpit. He was taking them back to Earth after a month visiting the mining colonies near Jupiter. It was supposed to be a simple journey. They had done it dozens of times before. The route was safe, the space lanes were monitored, and the Coalition protected all civilian vessels. Everything changed when the lights started flashing red. Sunwoo's voice came through the speaker, tight with concern. "Kids, stay in your seats. We're being stopped for inspection." Nari felt her stomach drop. She grabbed Hyun's hand as the ship shuddered to a halt. Through the window, she could see 3 Coalition security vessels surrounding them. They were dark and angular, nothing like the friendly patrol ships she had seen before. The docking clamp hit the hull with a loud bang that made Hyun jump. Nari held him closer as heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. The door hissed open and aliens in black armor stepped inside. The leader was tall and reptilian, with scales that gleamed like oil under the cabin lights. His eyes were cold and yellow. Behind him, an insectoid creature clicked its mandibles together in a way that made Nari's skin crawl. "This vessel is detained," the reptilian said. His voice was flat and mechanical through the translator. "All passengers will comply with security protocols." Sunwoo appeared in the doorway, his hands raised. "There must be some mistake. I filed all the proper documentation. We're just civilians heading home." "Your cargo manifest indicates possible nanite contamination," the insectoid clicked. "All persons aboard must be quarantined and processed. Nanites? I'm carrying mining equipment and personal effects. Nothing dangerous. That will be determined through proper channels." The reptilian gestured to his team. "Secure all passengers." What happened next would replay in Nari's nightmares for years. The security team separated them. Sunwoo shouted and tried to reach his children, but 2 guards held him back. Nari screamed as an alien grabbed her arm, its claws digging into her skin. Hyun was crying, reaching for his sister as another guard dragged him away. "Please," Sunwoo begged. "They're just children. Don't hurt them." "They will not be harmed," the reptilian said. "Standard quarantine procedures will be followed." But nothing about this was standard. Not for humans. Captain Ji-won Park stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship Unity's Promise, reviewing diplomatic reports when the message came through. Her assistant, a young officer named Kwan, handed her a datapad with a worried expression. "Captain, we have a situation at Harmony's Edge." Ji-won scanned the report, her jaw tightening with each line. A human civilian transport had been detained. The passengers had been separated for quarantine. Among them were 12 human children, the youngest only 5 years old. "When did this happen?" she asked. 3 hours ago?" The station commander refuses to grant access to the detained passengers. They cite security protocols. Ji-won felt ice forming in her chest. She had been a diplomatic officer for 8 years, working to build bridges between humanity and the Coalition species. She had learned their customs, spoken their languages, and defended their decisions even when her own people questioned them. But this was different. "Get me Commander Veltrix on the station, now." The insectoid commander appeared on the screen moments later, his compound eyes reflecting the bridge lights. "Captain Park, how may I assist you?" "Commander, I understand you're holding human passengers from the Morning Star. I'm requesting immediate access to them, particularly the children. I'm afraid that's not possible. They may have been exposed to dangerous technology. The quarantine period is mandatory." "How long?" "Initial assessment requires 72 hours minimum." Ji-won kept her voice steady, professional. "Commander, I need you to understand something about human children. They're not like your young. They require specific care, emotional support, and the presence of their families. 3 days in isolation could cause serious psychological harm." Veltrix's mandibles clicked, and what she had learned was the equivalent of a dismissive shrug. "All species find detention uncomfortable. They will endure. It's not about comfort. It's about development. Human children. Captain Park, I appreciate your concern, but Coalition protocols apply equally to all species. The children will be treated according to standard procedures." If they become distressed, our medical staff will provide sedation. The word sedation hit Jiwon like a physical blow. You can't sedate children for being scared. That's not medical care, This conversation is concluded. The quarantine will proceed as scheduled. Feltrix out. The screen went dark. Jiwon stood frozen, her mind racing through options. She could file a formal protest, but that would take days to process. She could appeal to the Coalition Council, but they moved even slower. Every hour that passed, those children were alone, scared, and trapped in conditions that could break them. She thought about her own childhood, the nightmares she'd had after getting lost in a shopping center for just 20 minutes. She remembered the panic, the overwhelming fear that she would never see her parents again. That was 20 minutes in a safe public place. These children were in alien hands in a cold station, surrounded by creatures they'd been taught were friends but now acted like monsters. And it would last for days. Kwan spoke quietly behind her. "Captain, what do we do?" Jiwon turned to her communications officer. "Send an emergency transmission to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Tell them the Coalition has detained 12 human children and is refusing access to diplomatic personnel. Tell them we need Admiral Choi out here immediately." "That's going to cause a serious incident, Captain." "I know." Jiwon looked back at the dark screen where Veltrix had been, but not as serious as what will happen if we do nothing. She sat down at her station and began composing a detailed report. Every word mattered now. Every piece of evidence would be used in the days to come. Because Jiwon knew something the Coalition didn't understand. Humanity would forgive many things. They would negotiate, compromise, and find peaceful solutions to almost any problem. But there was one line that could never be crossed. One mistake that would turn even the most peaceful human into something dangerous. The Coalition had just crossed that line. They had taken human children. Admiral Minho Choi received the message while his fleet was conducting training exercises near Mars. He was a tall man with gray streaks in his hair and scars on his hands from 3 decades of military service. He had fought in the border wars, negotiated the Treaty of Titan, and commanded humanity's defense forces through 2 decades of relative peace with the Coalition. He read Jiwon's report 3 times before he believed it. "They did what?" he said to his second officer. "Sir, the report is confirmed. 12 children detained 3 days ago. No contact with families. Captain Park has been denied access repeatedly." Minho stood up from his chair and walked to the viewport. Mars hung in the distance, red and familiar. He thought about his own grandchildren safe on Earth. He thought about what his daughter would do if someone took them away. Then he thought about what he would do. Signal the fleet. "We're moving to Harmony's Edge. Full combat readiness." "Sir, that's deep in Coalition territory. It could be seen as an act of aggression." "Good," Minho said. "I want them to see it coming." 7 warships left Mars orbit within the hour. The message was simple and direct. Humanity was coming for its children. On Harmony's Edge, Nari had lost track of time. The cell they kept her in had no windows and the lights never changed. She thought it had been 3 days, maybe 4. Hyun was in another cell somewhere. She could hear him crying at night through the walls. The other children were scattered throughout the detention level. Sometimes Nari heard them calling for their parents. The guards never responded. They just walked past with their clicking feet and their cold eyes. The cell was meant for adult prisoners. There was a metal bench that served as a bed. A toilet in the corner with no privacy and nothing else. The temperature was cold enough that Nari shivered constantly. They had taken her jacket during processing. Food came twice a day through a slot in the door. It was gray paste that tasted like metal. Nari forced herself to eat it because she knew she needed to stay strong. For Hyun. For the other kids who were even younger and more scared, she had tried talking to the guards. She had asked to see her father, to make a call, to just know that someone remembered they were here. The guards never answered. She wasn't sure if they even understood her. On the 3rd night, Nari heard Hyun screaming. Not crying, screaming. The sound of pure terror that made her blood run cold. She ran to the door and pounded on it with both fists. "Leave him alone." "Stop it, please." No one came. Hyun's screams continued for minutes that felt like hours. Then they stopped suddenly, cut off like someone had thrown a switch. Nari slid down the door and sobbed into her knees, imagining all the terrible things that could have happened to make her brother go silent. She didn't know that Hyun had simply cried himself into exhaustion. She didn't know the guards had done nothing except ignore his panic attack. All she knew was that her brother had been screaming and now he wasn't, and she was powerless to help him. That was when Nari stopped thinking of the Coalition as the good guys. Dr. Sujin Kang arrived at Harmony's Edge on a fast diplomatic shuttle. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for being able to explain human behavior to aliens in ways they could understand. The Coalition had consulted her dozens of times on cultural matters. This time they hadn't asked for her help. She had come anyway. She met Jiwon in a conference room near the docking bay. The captain looked exhausted, her uniform wrinkled from days of constant work. "Thank you for coming," Jiwon said. "Have you seen them yet?" Sujin asked. "No. Veltric still refuses access. He says it would compromise the quarantine." Sujin set down her bag and pulled out a datapad. "I've prepared a presentation for the station council. It explains human-child development, the psychological impact of isolation, the importance of parental bonding. I have studies, brain scans, historical data. If they see the evidence, they won't look at it," Jiwon interrupted. "I've tried. They don't think there's anything special about our children. To them, a juvenile is just a small adult. Then we make them understand." The meeting took place 2 hours later. Sujin stood before a council of alien officials and explained in careful detail why what they were doing was wrong. She showed them brain scans of human children, highlighting the areas still under development. She explained attachment theory, trauma responses, and the long-term damage that isolation could cause. Ambassador Thalmor, the reptilian who had ordered the original detention, listened with obvious impatience. When Sujin finished, he leaned forward in his seat. "Dr. Kang, I appreciate your concern for your species' young, but you must understand that every species finds detention uncomfortable. The Krix molt when stressed. The Yendi experience memory gaps. We cannot create special exceptions for every biological quirk." "This isn't a quirk," Sujin said, her voice hard. "Human children are fundamentally different from adults. Their brains are not fully formed. They don't have the emotional regulation or coping mechanisms to handle this kind of stress. What you're doing to them right now is creating trauma that will last their entire lives." "Trauma is a strong word, Doctor." "It's the correct word." Thalmor's expression didn't change. "The quarantine period has been extended to 30 days. We've detected anomalous readings in the ship's cargo that require further investigation. The passengers, including the juveniles, will remain in custody until the analysis is complete." Sujin felt the room tilt. 30 days? These children can't survive 30 days in isolation. They will adapt. "All species do? You're not listening to me." "No, Doctor, you are not listening to me." Thalmor stood up, his full height making him tower over her. "The Coalition does not change its protocols for one species' emotional sensitivity. The children are in standard juvenile detention. They are fed, housed, and monitored. That is sufficient." Jiwon stepped forward, her hand on Sujin's arm to hold her back. "Ambassador, I need you to understand something. If you continue this, Earth will respond, and that response will not be diplomatic." "Is that a threat, Captain?" "It's a warning." Thalmor looked at both women with something close to contempt. "Then warn them that the Coalition does not bend to threats. These children broke no laws, but their vessel is under investigation. They will remain in custody. If Earth has a problem with that, they can file a formal complaint." He walked out of the room. The other council members followed, leaving Sujin and Jiwon alone. "He doesn't understand," Sujin whispered. "He thinks we're just being overprotective." Jiwon's jaw was tight. "He'll understand soon enough." The message from Earth came 6 hours later. Admiral Choi's fleet had taken position just outside Coalition space. 7 warships armed and ready. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, so every species in the sector could hear it. "This is Admiral Minho, Choi of the Earth Defense Fleet. The Coalition is currently holding 12 human children in unlawful detention. We demand their immediate release. You have 24 hours to comply. If our children are not returned safely to their families, we will consider this an act of war." The Coalition response came from their High Council. It was formal, diplomatic, and completely dismissive. They would not be intimidated. The detention would continue. Earth should respect Coalition sovereignty. Jiwon watched the responses come in and felt something break inside her. She had spent years building relationships with these species, learning to see things from their perspective. But now she saw something else. She saw that for all their technology and their laws and their claims of civilization, they didn't understand the most basic thing about humanity. You don't take our children. Ever. The 24-hour deadline passed in tense silence. Admiral Choi's fleet held position, weapons armed but not firing. Inside Harmony's Edge, the Coalition Council met in emergency session. They were confident. Earth wouldn't actually start a war over detention procedures. It was unthinkable. They were wrong. Lieutenant Dae-hyun Lee crouched in the maintenance shaft, his team of 6 behind him. He was Ji-won's younger brother, though they rarely talked about their relationship. In the military, family connections could be a weakness. But when Ji-won had sent him the schematics of Harmony's Edge along with a simple message that said, "My hands are tied, yours aren't," he had understood. Thermal scans show the detention level is 2 floors down, his second whispered through the comm. 12 life signs matching human children. 20 guards on rotation. We go quiet as long as possible, Dae-hyun said. But if they get between us and those kids, we go loud. Clear? Clear, sir. They moved through the station like ghosts. Dae-hyun had trained for this kind of operation, but never thought he'd use it against the Coalition. They were supposed to be allies. But allies didn't cage children. They reached the detention level without being detected. Through a ventilation grate, Dae-hyun could see into the corridor. 2 guards stood at attention near a cell door. He signaled his team and they dropped down silently. The guards never knew what hit them. Dae-hyun's team used stun weapons that left them unconscious in seconds. They dragged the bodies into a storage closet and sealed the door. Then Dae-hyun looked through the window of the first cell and felt his training abandon him. A little girl sat on the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees. She was rocking back and forth, her eyes fixed on nothing. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her hair was tangled and dirty. Her clothes were torn. Yoonji. Dae-hyun read from the name tag on the door. 7 years old, he opened the cell door. The girl didn't react, didn't even look up. He knelt down slowly, making himself small and non-threatening. Yoonji, my name is Dae-hyun. I'm here to take you home. Nothing. She just kept rocking. One of his teammates appeared at the door. Sir, we found the others. They're in bad shape. Dae-hyun stood up carefully, not wanting to startle the girl. He moved to the next cell and found Hyun curled up on the metal bench, shivering. The boy looked up when the door opened and immediately scrambled backward into the corner. Don't hurt me, Hyun whimpered. Please don't hurt me. I'm not going to hurt you, Dae-hyun said softly. I'm human, see? I'm here to get you out. Hyun stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. Then he started crying, not the tears of a child who scraped his knee, but the deep, broken sobs of someone who had given up hope. Dae-hyun felt something crack in his chest. He was a soldier. He had seen combat, death, and destruction. He had trained himself not to feel, not to let emotion compromise his mission. But looking at this broken child, all that training meant nothing. Where's my sister? Hyun asked through his tears. They took Nari. I heard her screaming. We'll find her. I promise. They found Nari 3 cells down. Unlike the others, she wasn't crying or catatonic. She was standing at the door, her small hands gripping the bars. When she saw Dae-hyun, her eyes went hard. Are you here to hurt us more? She asked. Her voice was cold, empty of the trust that children usually had. No, I'm here to take you home. That's what they said. Before they put us in here, Dae-hyun opened her cell door. Your brother Hyun is asking for you. He's scared. Something flickered in Nari's eyes. Hyun, is he okay? He needs his sister. Nari pushed past Dae-hyun and ran down the corridor. She found Hyun and threw her arms around him, holding him like she would never let go. Hyun buried his face in her shoulder and cried harder. Dae-hyun's team had gathered the other children in the corridor. 10 kids ranging from 5 to 12 years old. They all had the same look, the same emptiness in their eyes. Some cried. Some stared at nothing. None of them looked like children anymore. Extract ready in 3 minutes, his second reported. But sir, we have a problem. The guards are doing a rotation change. They're going to find us. Then we move now. Everyone on me. The alarm started wailing before they made it to the elevator. Red lights flashed through the corridor and blast doors began to close. Dae-hyun grabbed the nearest child and ran, his team doing the same. They made it through the door with seconds to spare. But now the whole station knew they were there. Captain Ji-won heard the alarm from her quarters. She was already dressed and moving before her comm unit buzzed. Captain, we have a security breach on the detention level. Armed intruders extracting the human children. Ji-won ran to the bridge. She knew exactly who those intruders were. Daehyun had moved faster than she expected. Now she had to buy him time. She opened a channel to Veltrix. "Commander, I'm hearing reports of a security breach. Your people have invaded this station, Captain. That is an act of war. My people are rescuing children you refuse to release through diplomatic channels. They are criminals who will be detained along with... If you harm those children or my soldiers, Admiral Choi will turn this station into debris. Stand down and let them go." Veltrix's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. This is coalition territory. "We will not." The station shook. Jiwon grabbed onto her console as the lights flickered. On the view screen, she could see Admiral Choi's flagship unleashing a barrage that tore through Harmony's Edge's outer defenses. "That was your weapons array," Jiwon said calmly. "The next shot will be your shield generators. Then your life support. Admiral Choi is willing to kill everyone on this station to get those children back. Are you willing to die to keep them?" Veltrix stared at her through the screen. For the first time, she saw something like fear in his compound eyes. He had thought this was a diplomatic incident. He was just now realizing it was a war. "You would murder thousands over 12 children?" "Yes," Jiwon said simply. "We would. And if you knew anything about humanity, you would have known that before you took them." Another explosion rocked the station. Daehyun's voice came through on her personal comm. "Jiwon, we have the kids, but we're pinned down near Docking Bay 7. Heavy resistance." She looked at Veltrix. "Call off your guards now. Or my brother and those children die, and then there's nothing stopping us from destroying this entire station." For a long moment, Veltrix didn't move. Jiwon could see him calculating, trying to find a way out that didn't involve surrender. But there was no way out. There never had been. "All units, cease fire," Veltrix said finally. "Let them leave." Jiwon didn't thank him. She just closed the channel and contacted her brother. "You're clear. Get those kids out of there. Copy that, Jiwon. You need to see what they did to these kids. It's bad. I know. No, I don't think you do. One of them hasn't spoken since we found her. Another one won't stop crying. They're broken, sis." Jiwon closed her eyes. "Just get them home." The shuttle carrying the children docked with Admiral Choi's flagship 20 minutes later. Medical teams were standing by with blankets, warm food, and specially trained doctors. But nothing could have prepared them for what they saw. The first child off the shuttle was a boy named Jinwoo, age 8. He walked down the ramp with mechanical steps, his eyes empty. When a doctor tried to touch him, he flinched so hard he fell down. He curled into a ball on the deck, whimpering. The doctor, a woman named Hana who had worked in pediatrics for 15 years, dropped to her knees and started crying. She didn't touch Jinwoo. She just sat next to him and cried. Admiral Choi watched from the observation deck. He had seen soldiers break under torture. He had seen prisoners of war who couldn't speak about what had been done to them. But he had never seen this kind of damage in children. Nari came next, holding Hyun's hand. She looked at the assembled humans with suspicion, like she expected them to attack. When Choi stepped forward, she pushed Hyun behind her and raised her small fists. "Stay back," she said. Her voice shook, but her eyes were hard. Choi stopped. He held up his empty hands. "It's okay. You're safe now." That's what they said. "Everyone lies. I know they hurt you. I know you're scared. But I promise you, on my honor as a soldier and a grandfather, no one here will hurt you. We're taking you home." Nari searched his face for a long moment. Then her expression crumbled and she started crying. Not the quiet tears of someone trying to be strong, but the raw, desperate crying of a child who had been holding on too long. Choi moved forward slowly and wrapped his arms around both children, feeling Nari collapse against him. "I tried to protect them," she sobbed into his uniform. "I tried to be strong, but they wouldn't let me see Hyun, and I heard him screaming and I couldn't help him." "You did everything right," Choi said, his own voice breaking. "You were so brave, but you don't have to be brave anymore." The last child off the shuttle was Yoonji. She was carried by Daehyun because she wouldn't walk. She just stared at nothing, her body limp, her mind somewhere far away where the pain couldn't reach her. Choi had seen that look before, in soldiers who had seen too much combat, in prisoners who had been broken, but never in a 7-year-old girl. He looked at Daehyun. "How long has she been like this?" "Since we found her. She won't eat, won't drink, won't respond to anything. It's like she's just gone." Choi felt rage building in his chest, not the hot anger of battle, but the cold fury that came from seeing something unforgivable. He walked to the communication station. "Get me Dr. Sujin. and get me Ambassador Thalmor. It's time they understood what they've done. The meeting took place in the station's main council chamber. Thalmor arrived with his security detail, clearly expecting hostility. What he found instead were human medical staff tending to traumatized children, and human soldiers standing guard with tears on their faces. Dr. Sujin met him at the entrance. "Ambassador, I need you to watch something." She led him to the medical bay where Yunji lay on a bed staring at the ceiling. Her parents sat beside her, holding her hands and talking to her softly. She didn't respond, didn't even blink. "This is Yunji," Sujin said. "She's 7 years old. Before your people detained her, she was happy, healthy, and developing normally. She liked to draw. She wanted to be a scientist. Now she's catatonic." Thalmor's scales shifted uncomfortably. "Children are resilient. She will recover. Will she?" Sujin pulled up a holographic display showing brain scans. "This is a normal human child's brain. See these areas? They're still developing. They won't be fully formed until she's in her 20s. These regions control emotional regulation, stress response, and trust. Now look at Yunji's brain." The second scan showed dark spots in those same regions, areas that had gone dark, shut down to protect themselves from overwhelming trauma. "That's damage," Sujin said. "Permanent damage. She may never fully recover. Even with therapy, even with the best care, she will carry scars for the rest of her life. And why? Because you treated her like an adult prisoner when she's a child who needs protection. We didn't harm her. She was fed, housed. You put her in isolation. You separated her from her parents. You ignored her when she cried." Sujin's professional composure was cracking. "Do you understand what that does to a human child? We evolved to need connection. Our young are born helpless and stay vulnerable for years. They need constant care, emotional support, and the presence of trusted adults. Without that, they break." Thalmor looked at the brain scans, then at the girl lying motionless on the bed. "We have children too. They endure discipline and structure. Your children reach maturity in 3 years. Ours take 20. Your children are born with instincts that let them survive. Ours are born completely helpless and stay that way for years. We're not the same, Ambassador. You can't treat our young like you treat yours." They moved to another room where Jinwoo was being examined. The boy sat rigid on the examination table while Dr. Hana tried to check his vital signs. Every time she reached toward him, he jerked away. Jinwoo was happy to talk to aliens before this, his mother said from the corner. "He thought you were all fascinating. Now he can't stand to be near anyone who isn't human. You taught him to be afraid." In another room, Hyun was finally eating, but he wouldn't let Nari out of his sight. When a nurse tried to take his sister to another area for examination, he started screaming and wouldn't stop until she came back. "Attachment disorder," Sujin explained. He was separated from his primary caregiver during a critical fear response. Now he's terrified it will happen again. It will take years of therapy to help him feel safe. Thalmor followed Sujin through the medical bay, seeing child after child showing signs of trauma. Some cried constantly. Some wouldn't speak. Some flinched at every sound. All of them were broken in ways that would take years to heal. They found Admiral Choi in the observation room, watching the children through the glass. He didn't turn when Thalmor entered. "Do you know what you're looking at, Ambassador?" Choi asked. "Distressed children?" "No. You're looking at an act of war." Choi turned to face him. "Every species has something sacred, something they will fight to protect no matter the cost. For humanity, it's our children. Not because they're valuable resources or future workers, because they're innocent, vulnerable, and precious beyond measure. We didn't know. You should have known. You should have asked. You should have done literally anything other than throw them in cells and ignore their suffering." Choi stepped closer. "Do you see that girl, Yunji? She may never be normal again. Her parents will spend the rest of their lives watching their daughter struggle with trauma that you caused. And for what? A false alarm about nanites that were never there." Thalmor had no answer. "I want you to understand something," Choi continued. "The only reason you're still alive is because we got those children out. If even one of them had died in your custody, I would have reduced that station to atoms, and every ship in the human fleet would have supported me. That would start a war. Yes, and we would have won. Because when it comes to our children, there is no length we won't go to, no enemy we won't fight, no price we won't pay." Choi gestured to the medical bay. "Look at what you did. Look at those broken children and tell me that following your protocols was worth this." Thalmor looked. He saw Yunji's empty eyes. He saw Jinwoo's fear. He saw Nari trying to comfort her brother while fighting her own terror. And for the first time he began to understand. These weren't just small humans. They were something more precious, more vulnerable, more important than he had imagined. 3 weeks later, the children arrived on Earth. News crews captured every moment as the shuttle touched down at the main spaceport. Crowds had gathered, thousands of humans holding signs and crying. Not just the families of the detained children, but strangers who had followed the story and felt the same protective rage. Sunwoo stood at the front of the crowd, his hands shaking. He had spent 20 days in coalition custody himself, being questioned and processed. They had finally released him when it became clear that there never were any nanites, that the whole detention had been based on a scanner malfunction. 20 days of not knowing if his children were alive. 20 days of listening to officials tell him everything would be fine. 20 days of slowly losing his mind. The shuttle door opened. Nari appeared first, holding Hyun's hand. They looked thin and tired, but they were alive. Sunwoo ran forward and grabbed both of them, holding on like he would never let go. "Dad," Nari whispered and started crying. "I'm here," Sunwoo said through his own tears. "I'm here and I'm never leaving you again." Hyun didn't say anything. He just pressed his face against his father's chest and held on. The other families had similar reunions. Crying, hugging, holding on to children they thought they might never see again. But not every reunion was joyful. Yoonji's parents carried her off the shuttle because she still wouldn't walk on her own. She was awake now, technically responsive, but she moved like a ghost. Her mother tried to smile, tried to pretend everything would be okay. But everyone could see the truth. Their daughter was gone, and they didn't know if she would ever come back. President Yoon Han watched the reunions from her office. She was a careful politician who always measured her words, always considered the diplomatic consequences of every action, but not this time. She opened a live broadcast to the entire coalition. "My name is Yoon Han, President of the United Earth Government. 3 weeks ago, coalition forces detained 12 human children without cause. They held these children in conditions meant for adult criminals. They separated them from their families. They ignored their distress, and when we asked for their release, you refused." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard as steel. "Many of you have asked why we responded with military force, why we threatened war, why we were willing to kill thousands to save 12. I want to explain something about humanity that you clearly don't understand." She gestured to a screen showing the children being reunited with their families. Human children are not small adults. They are not capable of independence or self-sufficiency. They are psychologically fragile, emotionally vulnerable, and completely dependent on their caregivers for survival. When you took them from their families and locked them in cells, you didn't just make them uncomfortable. You tortured them. One of those children is now catatonic. Others have developed severe anxiety disorders, attachment issues, and trauma responses that will require years of therapy. You damaged them, possibly permanently, and you did it because you couldn't be bothered to understand that our species is different from yours. President Han leaned forward. "So let me be perfectly clear. There will be no apology from Earth. We will not pay reparations for the damage to your station. We will not accept any censure from the Coalition Council. What we will do is ensure this never happens again. We are proposing new laws that require member species to understand the developmental stages of other species before making custody decisions. Laws that protect vulnerable juveniles from being treated like adults. Laws with teeth that will punish anyone who harms a child through ignorance or malice. And if the Coalition refuses to pass these laws, then humanity will withdraw from the Coalition entirely. We will close our borders, end our trade agreements, and consider any species that harms human children to be our enemy." The broadcast ended. The Coalition Council went into emergency session. Ambassador Thalmor sat in the gallery, no longer part of the proceedings. He had been removed from his position the day after visiting the medical bay. The images of those traumatized children haunted him. He saw them when he closed his eyes. He heard their crying in his sleep. He watched as the council debated. Some members argued that Earth was being unreasonable, that no species could expect special treatment. Others pointed out that Earth had nearly started a war and had the military power to back up their threats. Dr. Sujin was invited to present her findings. She stood before the council and explained in careful detail, everything that made human children different. The brain scans, the developmental stages, the psychological needs. She showed videos of the children before and after detention. The stark difference between happy kids and traumatized victims. This is not about emotions or sensitivity, she concluded. This is about biology. Human children are fundamentally different from human adults, in ways that most of your species are not. If you want to have relationships with humanity, you need to understand this. We protect our children above all else. That is not a cultural choice. It is built into our DNA. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. Earth was too important, too powerful, and too angry to ignore. The sanctuary doctrine passed with near unanimity. It established protections for juvenile members of all species, with special provisions for those with extended developmental periods. It required training for all coalition security forces on species-specific juvenile care. It created harsh penalties for anyone who harmed a child through negligence or malice. It was the most sweeping reform in coalition history, and it existed because 12 human children had been locked in cells. Counselor Prime Zathara, the supreme leader of the coalition, personally delivered the announcement to Earth. It was an unprecedented gesture. Supreme leaders didn't visit individual planets. But this wasn't about protocol. This was about preventing war. She met with President Han in a closed session. No cameras, no recorders, just two leaders trying to repair what had been broken. We were wrong, Zathara said simply. We failed to understand your species, and children suffered because of our ignorance. I cannot undo what was done, but I can promise it will never happen again. President Han looked at her for a long moment. Do you know what Yunji's doctors told her parents yesterday? They said she might never fully recover. She's 7 years old and her life is permanently changed because you couldn't be bothered to ask a simple question. I know, and I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. Good. Because we will never forget. 6 months later, Nari sat in a therapist's office on Earth. She came here twice a week to talk about what happened. Some days were better than others. Today was not a good day. I still have nightmares, she told her therapist. I dream that I'm back in that cell and nobody's coming for me. That's normal, Nari. Your brain experienced a severe trauma. It's trying to process what happened, but it's been 6 months. Shouldn't I be better by now? Healing isn't linear. Some days will be harder than others, but you are making progress. Nari looked at her hands. Hyun won't sleep unless I'm in the room. He's terrified I'll disappear. And Yoonji. Her parents say she still doesn't talk. You can't take responsibility for the other children. You did everything you could to protect them. But I couldn't, I was just a kid myself. That's exactly right. You were a child and adults failed to protect you. That wasn't your fault. Nari started crying. She did that a lot now. Before the detention, she had been tough, confident, always ready to take charge. Now she cried at random times and startled at loud noises and couldn't be in small spaces without panicking. Will I ever be normal again? She asked. Her therapist chose her words carefully. You'll never be who you were before. That girl didn't experience this trauma, but you can become someone new, someone stronger, someone who survived something terrible and kept going. At the same time, Ambassador Thalmor walked through an empty corridor on Harmony's edge. The station was mostly abandoned now. After the incident, most species had stopped using it. It had become a symbol of coalition failure. He found Dr. Sujin in the old detention level. She stood outside the cell where Eunji had been held, just staring at the empty space. Why are you here? Thalmor asked. Bearing witness, Sujin said. Someone needs to remember what happened here. I remember. Every day. Sujin turned to look at him. Do you understand now? Why we reacted the way we did? Yes, I thought I understood children because my species has offspring. But we're not the same. Our young are independent within years. Yours need decades of care. I treated your children like I would treat mine, and I damaged them beyond repair. Yoonji spoke yesterday, first time in 6 months. She said 3 words. I want home. Thalmor felt something he had never experienced before. The humans called it guilt. It burned in his chest like acid. What do I do? He asked. How do I make this right? You can't. What's done is done. But you can make sure it never happens again. The sanctuary doctrine is a law. Laws are only as good as the people who enforce them. You want to make this right? Spend the rest of your life teaching other species what you learned. Make sure no one else ever makes this mistake. Thalmor nodded slowly. I will. Sujin turned back to the cell. In human culture, we have a saying, hurt a child and you answer to everyone. You learned that the hard way,